Wow, so I'm going to be reviewing an actual PC game for once. Flashback is an oddity in my game collection, because it's just a game I really have no other to compare it to. The game was developed and released in 1992 for the Amiga and the Genesis, with Super Nintendo, MS-DOS, and Acorn Archimedes ports releasing the year after. Then, 2 years later, a Sega CD, 3DO, CDI, Apple Macintosh, FM Towns, and an Atari Jaguar release. So essentially another James Pond situation, except Flashback is actually good. Actually, short intermission with a fun fact. Someone commented under my last video pointing out that the Amiga and Genesis, as well as the Atari ST, are actually more commonly grouped together than I thought, since they all use the Motorola 68000 processor, leading to easy conversions from one system to another. More of a due diligence type of trivia, but the more you know. Flashback was essentially promoted as a CD-ROM game on a cartridge, considering most console ports built off of the Amiga Genesis builds of the game. And you know, it really does feel like it. Flashback is at its best when it's viewed in more of a bubble. By no means is this to value the experience, but everything down to its design, art design, writing, and controls are relics of the time, and a huge contributing factor to its cult popularity. It's a cinematic kind of platformer, circling a surprisingly complex plot of aliens invading Earth as your memories are missing, and you have to retrieve them. Each level has this incredibly lush detail to the backdrops, and feels like a real functioning setting, instead of a poor diorama for the action to occur over. Input feels slightly delayed, however the trade-off is an incredibly fluid, albeit originally confusing control scheme. The animations are incredibly smooth as well, the result of rotoscoping being the main method of drawing sprites, a detail that's largely attested towards the game's ahead-of-timeness. That sounds like a word. You run through a decrepit subway system, a lush green jungle, an alien hellscape, an old club, all shooting monsters, cyborgs, dogs, aliens which I hate because I can't avoid them hitting me, and also sometimes the police because they look at you sideways. The game's focus is all around its world, the level design, and its puzzle mechanics. A lot of the time, you'll be collecting keys and finding ways to open doors, but it never feels too dreadful or exhausting, like games with a modern age feel. Each puzzle is enveloped in new mechanics you can obtain through items, or a new platforming obstacle to overtake with a surprising amount of movement choices, or a new enemy to take down, until the enemies all become these stupid blob aliens. I fucking hate these things. Your objectives become far more and more extreme, starting with you just walking through a forest. Then you gotta get a job so you can buy forged paperwork from some guy in a bar, so you get onto the subway to go to administration to get your working papers. Then you gotta hunt down a rogue cyborg pretending to be a human, so you can use that money to enter a game show in a death tower to get a ticket to Earth, all tied up with you getting your memories back and blowing up the core of an alien's nest. Combat in Flashback isn't really anything to write home about, but it's simple, it's neat, and it's effective, except for the aliens. The delay doesn't really disturb it, and gunfights are simple but satisfying to hit off. The game also has a really good, however scarce sense of humor in between its uniquely dated but stable gameplay and action. Its dialogue is usually very choppy and short, but within tends to lie subtle jokes and bits. It's the only game out there to my knowledge with social commentary on the DMV, which has to stand for something. Be real with yourself. Flashback is a game that tells more in a short but concise 6 hours with only 7 levels in 1992 than most games nowadays can tell in 30 or 60. It establishes a fantastic cinematic world in its own dated way and is definitely a timeless masterpiece of its time. And it's also getting a sequel after over 30 years. What the fuck?